Wow. So hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am going to take a wee look at 3 assault type tents together. We've got a lot of money's worth here, so I reckon about 3 grand in total. This one is probably the cheapest, which is my own Tarp tent Arc Dome. But I've also kindly been lent a couple of tents. I've got the Ferrino Extreme 2 and I've also got the Samaya Assault 2 8K, which was also lent to me just very recently. The weather has been terrible. So they're all soaking, they're all got quite a lot of water absorbed into their fly sheet, and part of what I want to do actually is do a kind of condensation test with a stove as well, just find out how breathable these are in theory. So I guess this is the kind of odd one out in a sense. This is a double skin assault style tent. There is an inner detachable and an outer. The outer is made of silicone coated polyester, which means there's very little stretch in it. And if you compare all three, and they've been out in about 24 hours of rain, you'll find that this has got a lot less stretch, which I quite like, whereas the other two tend to have absorbed a wee bit of moisture. But I'll cook in this one. What we're going to do is just do a condensation test with a stove. I'm going to boil some water and we'll just see just how they react internally and whether they can expel that air, because there are a lot of people interested in single skin assault tents, but we're always a bit wary about it at lower altitudes in the UK and whether they can cope with damper, less snowy conditions. So the baby of the bunch is the Ferrino Extreme 2, which is all about weight savings. So the actual tent minus the vestibule is only 890 grams packed, and that's partly down to the use of Dyneema on the floor, Dyneema on the vents, and a very thin fabric, breathable fabric on the tent itself, and the use of Easton carbon poles and quite a thin diameter. So it does give me slightly the fear, but it's been tested at ridiculous speeds in a wind tunnel. I'm not convinced in gusts, and I'm not convinced if it was side winds whether it would cope, because you'll notice it's the only one with no side guy pullouts. So that to me is a potential weakness in this one. But it's very much the baby of the bunch. It's only 90 centimetres high, and I think it is 105 wide. I'll put it on screen, maybe 110, but you can see how compact it looks compared to the other two. If you want to see it with the vestibule, which you can get as an add-on, you can get it in a full Dyneema vestibule, which only adds about 300 or 400 grams to the whole tent, which is pretty amazing. So it really is all about the weight saving, and it transforms the space. It's a very useful, quite well designed vestibule. I quite liked it. In terms of what venting you've got in these two, you have 2 top vents on the Ferrino. You've got similar but on the side on the Tarp tent, and then in the Ferrino you have a couple of side tunnel vents as well. You don't so much pitch this tent as wear it. It feels almost like you're putting a jacket on rather than sleeping in a tent. Very much a kind of bivvy style shelter. And then we have the Samaya, which is about, it depends where you buy it, etc. And it's not actually made anymore, but you can still get them online. But they're about 1,300 to 1,500 pounds. So we're into Hilliberg costs here. And it's not particularly well pitched, to be honest. But you can see the amount of sagging in the fabric. This one uses 37.5, it's called Breathable fabric. It's got a DCF floor, which is waterproof to 20,000 millimeters hydrostatic head. That's the same as the Ferrino. And it also uses DCF on these overhangs, which allows you additional venting, but under cover. And then it also has this kind of detachable roof panel, which is quite a smart idea, because what that does is it keeps the upper part of the tent dry, which in theory should promote a bit more breathability through the fabric. And there are also 2 monofill vents which can be sealed in here, which monofill's a very, very strong kind of mesh. It's actually used in hammocks, but it does allow moisture through, so this in theory should breathe better with the 2 side vents. These are also great because you've also got tie-in points for belays. You can attach it to these tapes here, and you can secure 2 climbers in there if you're on the ledge. But yeah, the venting is more extensive in this one, I would say, than in the Ferrino, in terms of it's much higher up, so it should vent more moist air. But what we'll do is we'll do a stove test and we'll find out. And as you can see on the Tarp tent, much more conventional 2 skin tent with a polyester inner a sill nylon floor, which I don't think has a hydrostatic head as high as the two DCF ones, but still sufficiently high that I've used it on snow without a footprint, without any issues, without any water getting in. But being double skin, in theory, any cooking in here should go through the fabric and then onto the fly, keeping the occupant drier. So for me, I would have thought this is a more versatile, all-season, all-round use tent. The difference being that the other two have a vestibule that you have to attach, which then increases the weight. This one, it's built in under the kind of perimeter of the existing fly shape. It comes in about 1.7 kilograms in total. If you looked at the Ferrino, which is the smallest and lightest, you're looking at about 1.2 or 3, roughly, with the vestibule. And then if you look at the Samaya, you're coming in at about 1.7 or 8 again, I think. I'll put it on screen. So kind of comparable probably in size, this to the Samaya. But it is you can change out the inners. This is a one person inner, or a 1.5 as they call it, whereas the Samaya can sleep two. The Ferrino in theory can sleep two, but it would be very, very tight. So we'll jump inside each of them, just give you an idea of the internal space in all three of them. No guesses that this is going to be the smallest. I think the Samaya will be very close actually to my Tarp tent. But it'll be interesting to see because I've not actually been inside this yet. Again, you maybe want to watch my previous video if you want to see this in more detail, just to give you a quick look around inside. Yeah, so it will sleep to. Very, very tight, very much a kind of bivvy specialist tent, and very, very compact for ledges. You can also see the height on it is fairly limited. I'm not sitting up in full and I'm not on a mat yet, but yeah, it's tiny. I like the idea of it for a solo and a nice warm tent. It has zippable vents at the top here, but there's no mesh on these, so you'd have to be careful with spindrift getting into them. Yeah, this is a big space for one. You can see what's called a 1.5. It really is pretty large. I really like it for that, because I've still got enough room to cook, but your floor area is much bigger. It's very wide at the ends. It's about 127 centimetres, which is basically a two-person width for a lot of other tents, but it does have this banana shape in it. But with having the polyester inside here, I'm going to try cooking, creating some condensation in it and see if it goes through the inner or does it condense on the inner itself. Right, let's jump in the Samaya. Kind of combo of DCF throughout, with the 37.5 fabric. I've also got the vestibule in here, which I haven't put up yet, but we'll pop that up and show you what it looks like. So this actually is immediately a much more livable space for two or for one. I really like the fact that it's got full length side pockets running right along it. It has a gear loft in here, it has two roof vents, and it has big side vents on either side with a DCF overhang. So all in all, it's very practically thought out. It is a good decent size on here. I think it's 120 wide by 220 long, so by assault standards it's actually quite a good shape. So let's just zoom out and show you how well you can vent this. You can see quite clearly now how you've got two side vents with YKK AquaGuard zips, a DCF overhang with a support pole, and then two zippable vents in the top with monofill underneath there, so there's no chance of spindrift or midges, bugs, etc. getting in. And then big side pockets for storing lots of gear. This is the stove, by the way, the fire maple I'm going to use to try a condensation test. And if you look closely at this fabric, this is 37.5 fabric, which I've had in Crux tents, amongst other things, and will work up to a degree until it gets absolutely saturated, and then it does start to run, based on my own experience. It'd be worth watching Tom Heaney's excellent videos as well though, because he really thinks that this just did not really condense at all in his experiments. So it might be that the additional venting and just being clever about how you use that will really help you. But as I say, that's not the core reason for buying one of these tents. It's really about high altitude alpine use. Nice gear loft as well. And it is a really useful space. You've got obviously the extra height in here compared to the Ferrino. Very similar actually to my Tarp tent. Kind of similar dimensions. The fabric is kind of translucent. It's not, it does feel a bit darker inside, but then it makes less noise in the wind, which I've noticed having used this fabric before. You can get a DCF or a silk nylon vestibule. Thing to mention about it compared to the Ferrino is the Ferrino's vestibule, the one certainly that came with it that Brian kindly gave us, was a DCF version, whereas this is the silk nylon version. Slightly heavier, about 400 odd grams I think. The DCF is lighter, but only by about 100 grams. And this is a lot cheaper, probably half the price of the DCF vestibule. But it is nice, slick, windproof design with the vestibules for snow and rock, so it's really rather nice, and it's quite easy to fit, I have to say. And it's got a nice long low profile, so I'd imagine you want to put this into the wind. But we'll pop inside and just have a quick look and see how much room it gives compared to the Ferrino version. It's a super long vestibule. It's the longest one I've ever seen. I actually think in an emergency you could sleep possibly even 2 adults virtually along this. It's so long. Quite low, but I like the way it dips down. The other thing worth mentioning is, in terms of quality, this one uses a DAC pole for its main support, whereas on the Ferrino, surprisingly for a similar cost, just has a kind of generic 7001 aluminium pole, unbranded basically. Well, it has Ferrino on it, but effectively a poorer quality pole. And a couple of nice side pockets in here. I haven't sealed it up properly or attached this, but this will all seal up round here, no problem. A nice door with a variety of ways, two-way zips to open it and to vent. So yeah, really nice addition to the tent. 20,000mm hydrostatic head as well, and this DCF is definitely a heavier duty version of what's on the Ferrino. I'll give you the difference in grams per square metre on screen. So Fire Maple were kind enough to send me their new Mars stove, which has got quite a high output, and it's a remote canister one, which I'm actually preferring these days, especially in winter. So, and it's relatively stable base as well. So we'll use this as an experiment. We'll boil some water in there for about a minute so we get lots of steam, and we'll just have a wee check. It's not particularly scientific, but it will give us an idea just how well they vent and cope with condensation, which will simulate moisture coming from your body. We'll boil up about 500ml of water, and then we'll let it run under full steam for about a minute and just check and see what effect it has on the fabric, if anything. Just let that heat up. This is boiling, let's leave it for a minute. That's hot. You can see the top vents, well, at least the rear one doing its thing with all the steam coming out the top, so that's encouraging. Okay, that's a minute, let's go in. Impressively like a sauna in there. Right, as you can see there's still quite a lot of steam and vapour inside here. It's feeling slightly clammy on the roof. But there's a bit of drip in here actually, but that actually has nothing to do with it. It's because the side of the tent is not guyed out. This inner is touching the outer of the fly at the moment. Just a slight clamminess. Even cooking inside the inner, which is not something you need to do because you can do it in the vestibule area. Let's just touch the fly on the inside and see how that is. Yep, that's kind of wet. Yeah, a lot of fresh moisture on that. So it has condensed through the inner and hit the fly, which is what you would expect in a 2-skin tent, and that's why so many of us use them. But now let's try the single skin versions and see how we got on with them. This was kind of lent to me by Brian Welsh, so I'm kind of nervous about doing these tests. Heating up nicely. Let's get the watch on, start that, and away we go. I've left a wee bit open at the top of here, and you can see the amount of steam that's coming out of there. Don't see so much coming out the top vents yet. It's worth mentioning the conditions are about 8 degrees and virtually still here at the moment, so probably a condensation fest is what I'm expecting for most of these. Most of it seems to be escaping through this front door weirdly. Very little coming from the vents, although I can see some heat shimmer. Let's stop there, that's a minute. Can't even see inside the tent. Wow. As you can probably see there, an absolute sauna. Steam room. I think it may even have fogged up the lens. But let's just find out just how damp and wet it is inside. I'll just have to safely remove this gear. Well, that's a surprise. I've actually just realised I left both vents closed. So that was pretty silly, that's why it was all going out the door. Having said that though, this is drier than my 2-skin tent, which is a complete surprise to me. Let me just check that I've got that right. Bit of moisture on the carbon poles, but not ridiculous, it's not dripping. But I swear that the fabric is completely dry. Now that is a surprise, I have to say. That's very interesting. Now this is a test where the flies are slightly damp on the outside from rain overnight, but they're not bone dry, which made me think it would really struggle to get rid of moisture, because I generally find that if the outer is wet, then the moisture just doesn't transfer properly. But this ultra thin fabric on the Ferrino has really worked, and I mistakenly left 2 vents shut. So with those 2 open as well, it would have got rid of a lot more steam as well. But it's genuinely dry to the touch, so that's quite amazing. Very surprised by that. So that was genuinely a surprise, but so we'll do the last one. The third one is the Samaya with the 37.5 carbon coated fabric. So it has this kind of print on the inside which is designed to absorb water and then let it release through the outer fly material. And it's something I've had quite a lot of experience with, and I think it's good up to a level, but when there's driving rain outside, eventually it becomes overwhelmed, and for me, didn't work. So on this test, what I'll do is I'll go about half the distance on the top vents, which is probably a realistic representation of if it's bad weather outside. You probably wouldn't want much more open. And then the 2 vents underneath here are also open. Right, so once again, a big shout out to Marek, who lent me this lovely tent. Just let that radiant heat burner get up to speed. 1 minute, here we go. And zip it up. Again, we'll leave a similar door gap at the underneath here. You can immediately see these vents working pretty well there. Seems to me the wind is probably coming slightly that way. So the side vents are definitely doing their job pretty well, as is the front door. And I dare say there is some moisture coming out underneath the DCF there, but I imagine this will turn out to be very wet on the underside. Whoa, and yet another condensation fest. Out the way. There we go. Again, bone dry. Absolutely nothing on my hands coming off the top here. But what I have noticed is that the 37.5 fabric, what it does is it absorbs the moisture, so it starts to rough up. So the inside of this fly this morning felt smooth completely, but the little carbon print is now raised. It almost feels like braille. So you can feel all the ridges have kind of absorbed some of that moisture. Normally what happens is you can feel more moisture on the tapes, in my experience, in 37.5. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see that, but there's moisture where it's taped, because this actually, although the tape has the carbon coating on it, it doesn't actually breathe the same way as the main fabric. I'm very surprised actually. I'll put my hand under the DCF and see how wet that is. Yeah, no, the DCF is damp, so you can feel that on the underside where that doesn't breathe. So again, yeah, that's actually, I think, surprisingly successful. The polyester inside my tarp tent actually had slightly more moisture on it. Just kind of felt slightly clammy, although it does have a DWR coating on it, so it's not completely breathable. But yeah, surprising. Both have worked really well in these conditions and in this particular test. It's a non-scientific test, but it was just something I want to find out for myself, and I'm genuinely surprised by the results. I can see no disadvantage in that test with a single skin tent against a double skin tent, which is really pretty surprising. Particularly the Ferrino, I'm actually most impressed with how breathable this fabric is. This has got 30,000 grams per square metre, 24 hours MVTR, so effectively a third more breathable, if that's correct, than the 37.5 fabric in the Samaya. So I'm thinking this may well be 30,000 MVTR on the fabric, and this is 20,000. Either way, quite impressive results, I have to say. I think one thing we'll maybe have to do, and I'll do maybe in a follow-up video, is we'll maybe try this again in driving rain when these are completely soaked. They are, to be fair, damp and only drying out now from the rain. So I honestly thought they would fail miserably in this weather, but they haven't. So genuinely surprised. If you've got any questions, drop a line below. It's not the most scientific test in the world, but it has turned out to be a bit of a shock for me. So yeah, it's good. It kind of gives me more hope that single skin tents are more usable than you might think. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little non-scientific trial. I also want to try and get this beastie out and maybe give this an overnight as well. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.